Hello, everyone. It is the Prophet Michael David, aka Aries, and today we're going to go over all that stuff. The protests, 4:30. That's April 30th, and its significance, and then also do some math stuff at the end. Okay, number one, the protesters, both the students and anybody else that is protesting this. I applaud you. I'm very proud of you. Never let anybody tell you that protesting the slaughter of innocents, especially women and children, is somewhat unpatriotic or I don't know. It's you're doing the right thing. I assure you. You're good people. Hopefully, you'll always have that quality. And now, the second part of that picture, the police officer. Number one, again, to the protesters, uh, they're horrible in a lot of ways, people being addicted to their phones. But in this case, always be having them phones on the police because to anybody that is police or whatever, um, you're not protecting or serving anybody but your masters who put that gun in your hand and give you your paychecks. That's the only people that you protect and serve. Um, you're not really upholding any laws. You're gangbangers with badges and dressed in blue. And so that way you're kind of like Crips with badges. You're not anything special. You're just sociopaths that gravitated to a career that has weapons and violence because violence makes you, um, horny. Okay, again, this is the last thing I'll say on this subject, but this has to do with the concept of the people saying, whether it's guns or bombing other countries or whatever, we're just protecting ourselves. Okay, we've talked about this before, but there are things you can protect yourself with, like armor, walls, stuff like that. But weapons, guns, knives, swords, bombs, planes, those are weapons. Those only have an offensive capability, and it's meant to kill people or at least maim people. And above all, scare people, terrorize them. That's really what it is. So the next time somebody says, I'm just protecting myself, you know, just remember, just violence makes them horny. That's the reason why they get those weapons. And then they just lie so they don't feel like such the sociopaths they are. Remember, you can't protect anybody or anything with a weapon. All you can do is hurt other people. And there are consequences for that in the afterlife. It's the same people wailing in front of Azrael, please let me go, please let me go, please let me go. All right, now segueing into 4:30, April 30th, and what part it plays in history, I guess mythology, you might say, prophecy, how it involves me, and some other figures. Okay, firstly, the last screenshot was of an old Jon Stewart skit from years ago, the first time he was on The Daily Show, that hit, recently. And April 30th was just a couple days ago, and that was the last day of Passover for 2024. And that's when I said that I might do a video on there, but then, I decided not to. I didn't want to ruin Passover because there's some uncomfortable information. Not a lot, but so that's what it has to do with 2024 is Passover ended on April 30th of this year. Oh, and one more thing. We've talked about this before, but I guess if you haven't seen the other video about like, if you ever had a question, what does Jesus have to do with Easter and the Easter Bunny and everything? Nothing. Jesus has nothing to do with Easter. Jesus has everything to do about Passover. What happened was since he died on a Friday and was resurrected on a Sunday, and the Jewish holy day was Saturday, the Christians kind of took Sunday as their holy day. And I'm not exactly sure how Easter is calculated, but original Easter is actually pagan. There's nothing Christian about it. It's a spring equinox festival to Ishtar, who is also known as Inanna, one of the Anunnaki, who is literally the angel of the Lord. So that's what Easter is. It's actually a pagan holiday that celebrated, probably the first full moon after the spring equinox, which is almost by definition Passovers. But that's why all three of them are intertwined. Why the Easter Bunny exists is a totally different story that we're not going to get into today. But there's a nutshell, difference between Easter and Passover, and why Jesus has nothing to do with Easter and everything to do with Passover. So, what is my personal connotation with April 30th? Well, um, my birthday, my Taurus birthday, as I've told you before, is on May 11th, 1978. I'm my mom's oldest child, firstborn. The thing was, though, like many firstborns, I was a difficult pregnancy, and my mom always said that I was almost 2 weeks late. So in mom's terminology, that's 13 or 12 days. I'm pretty sure it's 12 days, which would make my due date April 30th, 1978. But I was late by 12 days, and that was the only way that I could be born on May 11th, 1978. And May 11th is the mean and average of all Mother's Days, as we've talked about before. Just as the day I was reborn as Aries, April 5th, 2021, is the mean and average of all Passovers. And those days are exactly 36 days apart, and they always will be. Yeah, I found that just the other day, and that's the like sad part about the story, and the reason why I didn't post this video on actual April 30th, because I didn't want to ruin the end of Passover for any of my Jewish watchers watching. So yeah, I guess Hitler died or killed himself in Evebron on April 30th, 1945, just as all the Allies were closing in. And another fun fact about Hitler is Hitler was born on 420. So he would be a Aries Taurus cusp baby. And I know what you're thinking, but I'm full Taurus and full Aries. And even if he knew that he was a cusp baby, some people don't know. They identify with one side or the other. He could have considered himself a Taurus or an Aries, but he was only half of both. And I'm a full Taurus and a full Aries. Plus, most importantly, I'm not Hitler. Most people aren't. So, but yeah, he did die on April 30th, and he was born on 420. And you might be asking, so why did they make National Smoking Day or the time to smoke weed Hitler's birthday? It's because they didn't know, or they didn't know it was Hitler's birthday. The story I heard was 420 was invented or caught on because there were some students at like Berkeley after their last class of the day would go out to this tree or this spot, and they would all meet there, and they would all smoke a joint starting exactly at 420 because that was when everyone could get there, and it was a great time. Plus 420 is divisible by 6, 7. The whole 42 thing is hitchhikers from hitchhikers, and so it's a real culturally noticeable number and everything. But they probably most likely didn't know that it was Hitler's birthday. Otherwise, they would have picked a different time. But it was the time, the date for National Smoking Day came later because 420 was actually a day too. So that's the story in a nutshell. Hitler was born on 420 and died on 430. All right, now for the end of this video, we're going to get into some math. I'm going to tell you guys what I'm like currently like right now working on, and why I think it's so amazing, and like it's confusing. I kind of like it, but so what I'm doing is I'm analyzing the most divisible numbers in the number spectrum. You can watch some of my other videos to see how I'm doing it, because those are like the opposite of what the primes are, and they are related to the primes in some way. And I'm pretty sure I know how the Riemann hypothesis works and what it is, but I'm still working on it. Anyway, to estimate these very large numbers that I talked about before, I got to the point where I can't use spreadsheets anymore because I would be making hundreds, if not thousands, of spreadsheets for just single one line of data, and I can't do that. So I had to find out a good way to estimate them. And so I talked about how I thought about using Euler's constant, but it wasn't like exact enough. But I found in my own work, analyzing the harmonics, that I could produce it a different way, and that it converged very quickly. And I think it'll work out great, but it also has some properties that I didn't really foresee, and it's confusing. So Anyway, here's what the constant is to the first 50 decimal places. So then what I did, because I'm me, is I made a spreadsheet of this. I was going to use that constant, even though I knew that the spreadsheet wasn't going to take all 50 decimal places. It only takes like, 15 decimal places. That's where it cuts it off. And I used my last template from actually getting the harmonics from, pulling down the spreadsheet. And that one ended at 750,000. So I knew that number was dead on, minus any floating points that get cut off for that. But those numbers were as exact the truth as you're going to get with a spreadsheet. And so in between that, I started analyzing 750,001 and how it related to the constant with my equation, e to the h2 minus e to the h1 is always going to be that 1.710724 like number, which if you take the natural log of that, then that's Euler's constant. So this is what the spreadsheet looked like. So then I was like, all right, I'll just take the natural log and find out what that actual value and how close it is to the wiki value is, and see like how fast or how close it is to converging on it. But that's not what it looked like. This is what it looked like. So again, that black line, and I think you can see it at the right of the thing, is I manually put in a reference line and I typed in the first whatever 20 digits of Euler's number or whatever it would take. And as you can see, the value does fluctuate around that. And that's really only about 450 data points. So from like 750,001 to 750,450. But as you can see, that's not converging to any value. That's a waveform that's waveforming around the value. And maybe it converges more in the future or the waveform gets lower. But I looked at that and I'm like, that's not really converging. That's a waveform that's averaging around that value. And yeah, it was just surprising. So then I decided to finally make a projection line, and that's what that line is, P1. It's a projection using Euler's value on wiki versus the actual values. Again, I'm not making any more spreadsheets like this because, 750,000 to 1.4 million is going to be a lot of spreadsheets at 50,000 at a time. But I could still use the equations in there from 750,000 to like 750,500 just to see what Euler's constant is doing. And that's all I'm doing here. I'm not really using the harmonic values anymore, I'm just trying to find a good way to estimate them. So I was like, okay, well, then I'll just make my projection line. I'll use Euler's constant straight out of the wiki, the first 50 or how many decimal places um, that the thing would take. And I'm like, it should be pretty flat, you would think, but it's not. It looks like this. See, it has a downward trend. And the actual harmonics is like, I'm just taking the actual harmonics and using the actual Euler's constant from wiki and everything. But it has a downward trend. So P is getting larger than the projection is getting larger. And so then I started taking away some of the number because if I make P smaller, then eventually I could get it flatlined. But it's very difficult to do because even if you just change the numbers a little bit, then you go from a downward trend to this. See, now it's an upward trend. And all mod means is it's I modified it a little bit, and it's probably a bad choice of terms considering that I use mod lines all the time, and that stands for modulus. But I'm still tweaking this and working on this, but I'll show you in the last two screenshots how close the numbers really are. I mean, I'm modifying like 12 decimal places out, and the number is going from, you know, upward to downward, and doesn't seem to be flatlining at all. But I only have so many decimal places, and I think it's like whatever 14 or 15 in the actual spreadsheet. So eventually, I will get to an end with a number that either goes up, down, or hopefully flatter. But it's so weird. But again, these last two spreadsheets or screenshots will show you exactly how close the two projection numbers really are. All right, that's about it for the day. Video a little long again, but I thought I was pretty efficient. So, as always, rule number one: do not touch other people without their consent, aka do not hurt each other. And rule number two: it's all about honesty. Lies are a tick down, aka try not to lie. And if you can conform by those two rules, which really isn't that hard, you know, peace and blessings be upon you and your family or your loved ones.